the #1 long-form writer that helps SEOs outrank competition at the click of a button using real-time research and NLP. Start ranking content today with content@scale.ai.
Wix Studio, one end-to-end web creation platform for your agency to deliver exceptional work with absolute efficiency.
Hi everyone, I'm Ellie Connor. I'm an SEO director at iCrossing, and I'm here to speak today about how to measure SEO sustainability. And before I begin, I actually want to touch a bit upon why I'm here. The main reason I'm here is to make you all feel a little bit terrified, which I admit is a bit of a rogue way to start my talk. But I also want you to feel other emotions. I want you to feel hopeful, empowered, but most importantly, motivated to make your websites and your clients' websites more sustainable. So let's get on to it. First of all, hopefully we don't need to recap why we need sustainability. I think every one of us can attest to the fact that every day in the newspapers there's some news, terrifying stat about how global warming has now become global boiling, about wildfires in France, or just the threat of seeing a new David Attenborough documentary. But the fact is that we do need to think about sustainability from an SEO perspective as well. Now, I have to admit, I know it's overwhelming to think about climate change. It often feels like we can't do anything. And if any of you are like me, some of you will be feeling like you commit eco-sins, and therefore there's really no point in doing anything. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I know, for example, I should definitely be eating less red meat, and yet after a night out, the kebab shop still calls to me. But the thing is that I think what I want to do is to pivot away from thinking about perfection and instead think about what we can do with our expertise to make a change in the climate battle. And I'm hoping that at Brighton SEO, we have a bunch of SEO experts here. So I guess my first question to you guys, some of you might be thinking, what on earth has SEO got to do with sustainability? So maybe by a raise of hands, could some of you let me know if any of you, when traveling, have ever used a carbon offsetter? Okay, that's a few of you. And it makes sense, right? Like, we're told that planes are bad. Planes contribute to climate change. And that's true. The entire aviation industry contributes towards 3.5% of carbon emissions worldwide. However, the internet actually contributes towards more, admittedly by 0.2%, but still. The fact is that the internet contributes toward climate change because we're just using it more, and that uses more energy. So 10 years ago, for example, the average internet user contributed towards 0.2 grams of carbon every day. That number has now increased to 8 grams of carbon a day. This is because we're just using the internet more and more. So I guess like another poll, how many of you have considered sustainability within your SEO strategy? Okay, there's a few hands. You guys are better than me. I did not consider it at all until like a couple of years ago. I really didn't see the link between SEO and sustainability. But if we're talking about internet sustainability, we are talking about SEO sustainability. Because essentially, 70% of internet traffic comes from Meta and from Google search. So the two are interlinked. And the fact is that if the internet were a country, it would be the 6th biggest contributor towards climate change. So it really is within our power, and it's our duty to think about how we as SEOs can be more sustainable within search. And for those of you doubting that any of this is true for Google specifically, the global carbon footprint of Google search is equivalent to 7 return trips to the moon every single day. This is because of how many people are using the internet every day. Think about, the average Google user is using, for example, Gmail, going on YouTube for hours on end. It's not just about search, it's about all the Google packages. There's definitely changes that we need to make. Let's not forget the rise of AI. ChatGPT has changed the search landscape immeasurably. And essentially, what we need to think about is how much energy ChatGPT uses. So in a year, ChatGPT contributes 8 tons of carbon, which is twice the amount of an individual per year. In terms of water wastage, this also is a lot too. A lot of energy is required to train GPT-3. And in fact, 700,000 litres of water were required to train ChatGPT, which is the equivalent of making 340 Teslas. Essentially, every conversation we have with ChatGPT also contributes towards water wastage. Every time you have a normal 20 back and forth conversation with ChatGPT, you're essentially pouring a bottle of water on the ground. Now look, I'm not saying we shouldn't use the internet or I'd be out of a job. But the fact is that we need to think about how we reduce how much energy is spent on search. And I've bucketed this into 3 different ways. So the first one is thinking about how we can reduce the energy needed to load a page. Essentially, if we, and this hopefully should be obvious, if we're making every time a page is loaded more energy efficient, that will contribute towards less carbon emissions. Equally, if we reduce and use the number of page loads, that will also reduce the amount of energy used. So essentially, part of our job as search engine experts is to get users to the right page faster. By reducing the amount of times that users don't find the right page and are therefore clicking around trying to find what they want, we're actually helping people to also reduce their energy footprint. Finally, the one that we often don't consider is about bot crawls. So every time Google bots crawl our website, that also requires energy. So the more we make bot crawls easier and make Google understand better how to navigate our websites, the more energy efficient it is. So how do we measure all of this? Now, I'm going to give a spoiler alert. I'm a normal person. I'm not an environmental expert. I'm an SEO expert. And the fact of the matter is it's incredibly difficult to come up with really accurate numbers for energy usage when it comes to SEO. And there's 2 reasons for this. One, it's actually very difficult to actually define when we start the energy journey. So, for example, do we count the time that, when you're clicking a search result and somebody... Is it okay? Oh, it's my hair. Oh, that's having a bad hair day. Okay. Apologies. So essentially, as I was saying, it's hard to define the energy journey because do we start it when you're clicking a website result and the server energy required? Or are we starting from the manufacturing of a computer and the energy that takes? Or are we starting from when the postal worker who sends your mobile phone has to be in the office building, et cetera, et cetera? It goes on ad infinitum. So that's pretty difficult to start when we're measuring. In addition, there's just plenty of unknowns. There's the fact that, how much energy you use depends on your location, the time, and whether your servers are using renewable or non-renewable energy sources. And that's incredibly difficult for us to calculate. So essentially, a lot of these are going to be really rough numbers. But the idea is that if we use these numbers as a benchmark, we can then use them for comparison. So let's go back to basics. How does SEO contribute towards energy usage, and how does that make water waste and carbon emissions? So hopefully the carbon emissions one you should all be fairly aware of, but just to be clear, every time we're using energy, it needs electricity. Electricity comes from 2 sources, renewable and non-renewable energy sources. Whenever we're using non-renewable energy sources, we have to burn fossil fuels. That releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This gets trapped within in the atmosphere and causes the overall planet temperature to rise. For water waste, it comes from 2 sources. So first of all, hydroelectricity. This is obviously a much better source of energy than fossil fuels, but nonetheless, it is water waste. Secondly, using servers. Servers get very hot. They therefore require to be cooled down. This wastes water. So let's go back to how we can look at those metrics that reflect lower energy consumption. Hopefully these are not new for you, but primarily we'd be looking at things such as, when we're considering faster page loads, things like page speed, core web vitals, server load time, CDN time, having a better text-to-code ratio, SSR presence, and page size. It's a little bit harder with looking at less page loads, but nonetheless not too difficult. I think the primary one would be low bounce rate. This is because if you have a lower bounce rate, it indicates that users are finding your page more efficiently and they're not bouncing around onto different pages. In addition, another good factor would be to look at the time spent on page, ideally lower if there's a high conversion rate. This also indicates that users are finding what they need if they're landing on PLPs. Finally, having a crawl depth less than 3. This is super important because if a user doesn't find what they need, within 3 clicks, they should be able to find the page that they need. Finally, easier crawls. So having an optimized IA, I admit, is more of a yes-no. So essentially, if you have an optimized information architecture, it makes it easier for Google bots to crawl. Having all your 200 indexable URLs in the sitemap and removing the ones that aren't indexable in 200 status will also help Google bots better crawl your website. Hopefully, for all the tech SEOs in the building, no 4xx, 5xx errors, no 3xx redirects. This should all be stuff that we're used to. So, does this look familiar? Hopefully, yes. Ideally, a good SEO strategy is a sustainable strategy. And if I'm honest, it kind of at this point seems more like a happy accident. It just so happens that having a good user journey is naturally a more sustainable one, which is SEO's bread and butter. But moving forward, it might not always be the case that this is unintentional. Google has very ambitious, sustainable goals. By 2030, Google wants to be carbon zero. It has already been carbon neutral for years now. Bing as well, we're not just talking about Google, Bing is aiming to be carbon negative by 2030 as well. So essentially, I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what is going to be in the algorithm in a couple of years' time. However, if I were to bet, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these sustainability factors were coming into ranking factors. Now look, I wish I could say that every time I speak to a stakeholder about core web vitals, they're as excited as I am. But the truth is that probably if we're speaking about carbon dioxide emissions and water wastage, that's going to speak more to businesses and to stakeholders. This is because a lot of financial bursaries rely on those types of statistics. So essentially, we need to also be speaking about these metrics as well. So put very simply, if we calculate energy usage for a web page load, we can roughly calculate the carbon dioxide and water usage. Now, just to kind of heads up, I'm going to be discussing some very small numbers in the next couple of slides and using the word roughly about 10 million times. But essentially, what we've done is we've had a look at the journey of a web page load to look at this. So this is just our definition of how we think we should calculate energy. So what we've looked at is we've looked at the server energy plus the data center energy and calculated that together. So, on average, a server request uses roughly 0.00015 kilowatt hours for a 1 second page load. We know that a data center requires 1.8 times more energy than the servers it houses. Therefore, add that all together, we're looking at 0.004 kilowatt hours for 1 second of page load. Now, all of that might seem pretty insignificant, but let's add that all together. If we're looking at carbon footprint, we know that the carbon intensity, very roughly, globally, is 0.5 kilograms for a kilowatt hour. So for every 1 second of page load, we're looking at 0.2 grams of CO2. What does this mean? It means that for a single page that has a 2.5 second page load time and 10,000 visits a month, it's the equivalent of lighting up the Eiffel Tower for a year. Oh, sorry, no, equivalent of lighting up the Eiffel Tower for a month over a year of time, otherwise that'd be crazy. However, if we think about that, there's a couple of things I want to point out here. A 2.5 second page load speed is pretty good. And I think we all know some websites which are far lower than this. Also, some websites will have more than 10,000 visits a month. And I think the most important one is your website, I hope, consists of more than just a home page. So this is all going to add up pretty quickly. Let's look at water footprint. So similar calculation, we've got the 0.004 kilowatt hours. Water wastage comes roughly 3 liters per kilowatt hour. This is roughly split in half between hydroelectricity and also from cooling down servers. This is then calculation is it's 1.2 milliliters of water for every 1 second of page load. So again, if we think about that in how we can imagine that, if your home page has a 2.5 second page load speed and 10,000 visits a month, you're looking at 20 baths a year. So there's quite a lot of metrics I've just discussed now, and if you're doing an audit of a website, I doubt you're going to remember all of that. So what we've done at iCrossing is we've made an SEO sustainability calculator to make our audits easier. So I've added a link to my slide deck. You can find it on SlideShare and also on Speaker Deck, sorry, and also on LinkedIn under Ellie Connor. You can also contact the results at iCrossing.co.uk if you want to use it. But how does it work? It's really easy. So essentially what we've done is we've put it in that you can choose a device, so mobile or desktop, and then you input a bunch of URLs. So the difference with this tool versus other carbon calculators online is that this is purely from an SEO perspective. So a lot of the carbon calculators online, you can only do one URL at a time. This, you can do it in bulk. It also looks at the water footprint as well, which many do not look at. Once you've put in the URLs, you press script run, and it then does the rest for you. So what it will do is it will pull the most important metrics. So we're adding more as we go along, but at the moment, these are the metrics we've put into the calculator. And what it will do is it will have a look at pulling that from an API and calculating as well the carbon footprint and the water footprint. After that, it will also give you then a scoring. So it will let you know whether for each of those metrics you're passing, doing okay, or failing. And then finally, you'll get a sustainability score. Oh, sorry, here. So I'm coming to the end of my talk, and I just want to discuss next steps with you. So what I want you to do is I want you to look at your website sustainability and start calculating how sustainable it is. So again, this is something you should be doing already. These are all factors that will make your websites rank better. But essentially, whether you use this slide deck and look at the metrics or use our tool, hopefully you've now got the instruments you need to calculate website sustainability. Then you can start identifying key sustainability gains, so having a look at where you can improve your website from an energy perspective, and then fix those energy inefficiencies. And then it's more of a rinse and repeat process. I mean, that's the nature of SEO. So I want to end on some good news. So back in the 1980s, scientists found a hole in the ozone layer. Don't know if you guys remember this. In 1987, basically all chemicals that were harming the ozone layer were banned. And it now looks like that by 2065, the ozone layer is going to be on track to repairing itself. So essentially what I'm trying to say, and this is the hopeful part, that it's not too late for us to combat climate change together. If you have any questions, please do message me on LinkedIn under Ellie Connor. You can also email us at results@icrossing.co.uk. I'm also going to be around, so please do come up and talk to me. And I guess the rest is just thank you so much, and I hope you have a great time at Brighton SEO.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.